Good morning, everyone. So it is 3 weeks since I have been here. You have to tell me what you've been doing in the meantime.
Well, we read the second section, and then we went back and started on it. But exactly how far?
You made a start on studying the second section in detail, yes. Page 26 it starts. You finished reading it. Did you go back to the beginning and start looking at the sentences? It's a fairly long section. Shall we go back to the beginning? You thought we were on page... The second section starts on page 26. Maybe we'll start at the beginning. Or if you're sure that you did some, then you tell me. You were also absent. Who was here? Larry was here.
No, but the time we were in third,
I think you should start with the second section.
I think we're
sentences.
yeah, because we had a lot of discussion on the others.
Where are you recommending us to start, Larry?
Page 34.
we can start by line
What page?
26.
Okay. We have read page 26. Now we're going to look at it in more detail. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to start at the top today? Leila, would you begin?
As soul grew into his larger self, humanity framed his movements less and less. The greater being saw a greater world. The feelers were for knowledge there to erase, the lines of safety, reason draw, set bar, mind soul. Souls dive into being. Even his first steps broke out smaller bounds and watered in a vaster field air. In hands sustained by transfiguring might, he got up, lightly like a giant's bow, left slumbering in a sealed and secret cave, the powers that sleep had used in man within. He made of miracle a normal act, and turned to a common part of divine works, magnificently natural at this height, efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts, pursued in the loyalty of mighty youth, aims too sublime for nature's daily work, the gift of the spirit crowding aching them. The will's light better in this brain.
Thank you. So in the first section of this canto, Sri Aurobindo introduced us to King Aswapati, who will become the human father of Savitri. He is the one, the protagonist in this mysterious play of the universe, through whom the world's desire, the need of the material world gets expressed. And in the first section, we got a general description of King Aswapati's higher inner nature. And now, in the rest of the canto, we are going to, Sri Aurobindo is going to share with us in more detail the steps of Aswapati's sadhana, the yoga of the soul's release, the liberation of the soul from ignorance. And he begins here by telling us that Aswapati grew gradually into his larger self. And as he did so, his movements, his actions were framed less and less by ordinary humanity. A greater being saw a greater world. His whole relationship with the outer world changed. One of the characteristics of Aswapati is this fearless will for knowledge. And so he dares to erase the lines of safety reason draws, that to protect us. Reason is our guide, and to prevent us going astray, it draws certain barriers. It's, I think, an allusion to an incident in the Ramayana where Sita has to be left alone, and Lakshmana draws a line.
Lakshman Rekha, it's called. Lakshman Rekha?
That's his line. And he says, don't step over that until Rama and I return to you. But unfortunately she does, and so that sets the whole story off. But reason protects us in that way. Don't overstep these boundaries. But in this fearless will for knowledge, Asvapati dares to erase them. And so those lines of safety were barring mind soar, the higher flight of mind into greater levels of consciousness, and they were barring soul's dive into the infinite, into the ocean of infinity. Even his first steps broke our small earth bounds, the boundaries of our human nature, and loitered in a vaster, freer air. I remember we talked about this this verb to loiter 3 weeks ago. Yes. So if anyone has any questions about this passage, otherwise we'll move on. What comes next is the description of the gifts of the Spirit, caught up lightly like a giant's bow. It also reminds me of some of the legends in which there's a weapon, a bow, that's far too heavy for any ordinary person to pick up. So I think in Ramayana, Rama picks up that bow. Is it Shiva's bow? And is able to string it and loose an arrow. So this is the way in which he wins the hand of Sita. And in Mahabharata, Arjuna does something similar, I think, that he is able to.
Also Ulysses.
And yes, in other stories also, Ulysses.
These stories, they are transmitted
from one culture to another. Yeah. And of course, in our Western legends, it's not a bow, it's a sword. King Arthur can take and use that sword that nobody else can take. So Sri Aurobindo here is using this bow as an image for certain powers that we human beings have within us, but that we don't usually use. They are left sleeping, unused in us. But he was able to access them and use them. And in that way, he could normally do things that seemed miraculous, and he could turn to a common part, an ordinary, everyday part of divine works, efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts. But he could do that in a very natural way, magnificently natural at this height. He pursued in a royalty of mighty ease. He's of course an earthly king, the Hugh King, but he's also a ruler of the inner nature, so he can do things in this royalty of mighty ease, aims too sublime for nature's daily will, the kind of everyday things that we want to achieve. And for him, the gifts of the Spirit, crowding, came to him. They were his life's pattern and his privilege, the special capacities that were given to him. And these gifts of the Spirit are what are described in the rest of this section. Audrey, would you like to read?
A pure perception, then its reason glory, its intimate vision waited not to think. This enveloped all nature in a single glance. It looked into the very self of things. Deceived no more by form, he saw the soul. In beings it knew what lurked to them unknown. It seized the idea in mind, the wish in the heart. It plucked out from gray folds of secrecy the motives which from their own sight men hide. It felt the seething life in other men, invading with their happiness and their grief, their love, their anger, their unspoken hopes, entered into currents or in pouring waves into the mobile ocean of his calm. He heard the inspired sound of his own thoughts, new echoes in the vault of other minds. The world's thought streams traveled into his ken. His inner self grew near to others' selves and bore a kinship's weight, a common tie, yet stood untouched, king of itself, a magical accord, quickened and attuned to eternal symphonies, the old earthly strings. It raised the servitors of mind and life, the happy partner.
Thank you. So I think the first of these gifts of the Spirit is this pure perception that is not clouded by any earthly limitations or habits. It gives this intimate vision so that thought is not needed. It can be a direct perception of the very self of things. He can see the soul of things. He's not misled by the appearances. And he can see things in beings which they are not aware of. We know that these are experiences which Sri Aurobindo and the mother had. No? They were able to, when people came before them, they were able to see the ideas in their mind and the ideas that they didn't want to show, that they wanted to keep hidden. No? The wishes in the heart. That perception could pluck out from grey folds of secrecy, those grey folds of consciousness where we hide things from ourselves. Those motives, the intentions or the wishes that men hide from their own sight. And he becomes aware of the beating life in other men, their feelings, their happiness and their grief, their love, their anger, their unspoken hopes. They come flowing in little currents or sometimes in powerful waves into the immobile ocean of his calm. This immobile ocean of inner calm, I think, is the basis and the condition for this pure perception. If there's any disturbance in the surface being or the inner being, this pure perception will not be possible. So it allows him to hear the inspired sound of his own thoughts re-echoed in the vault of other minds. Sri Aurobindo has spoken about this or written about this, how he could recognize his own thoughts coming back to him from other minds in the world stream. The world's thought streams traveled into his ken, into his awareness, his knowledge. And at the same time, his inner self grew near to other selves. There's a very close awareness of the self of others. He feels that weight of kinship, of connection, of close relationship with them, this common tie. And yet, this doesn't disturb his inner being. It stood untouched, king of itself, alone. I think that's the first, this pure perception is the first step. Then comes a magical accord. Ganga Lakshmi, would you read?
The magical accord weakens and turns. The imperial symphonies roll the Hercules strings. It raises the servitors of mind and life. To be happy partners in the soul's response. Tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords, records of lust and ecstasy. It made the body's needs, the spirit operates. In it, even life functioned with a finer mode, lived with its grace man's outward earth release. The soul's experience of its deeper peace, no more sleep, dragged by matter's dominance. In the day, wall closing us from wider sight, into a secrecy of apparent sleep, the mist trapped beyond our waking thoughts. The door parted, built by the matter's force, releasing things unseized by earthly signs. The world unseen, unknown by outward mind, appeared in the silence, peace of soul.
Thank you. So the second gift is this magical accord, this harmony, this attunement. All the old earthy strings of our physical instrument get quickened, made more sensitive and alive, and attuned, more finely attuned to ethereal symphonies, to very, very complex music that is happening on the higher levels, on the ethereal level, beyond the lower elements. And so that attunement, that magical accord, lifted up the servitors of mind and life. This is the senses and the responses to the senses. They are the servants of our mind and our life. No? They get lifted up so that they are no longer just servitors to the mind and life. They can also be happy partners in the soul's response. The soul senses and perceives things in this finer way. Now even the physical parts are able to respond. So tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords. They could record, they could receive and record and pass on to the soul and the body records of luster, of light, and of ecstasy. So this accord made the means of the body, all the things that we use for our bodily life, could become acolytes of the spirit. Acolytes are apprentices, I think, who assist the priest in his in performing the sacred rituals, the sacred duties. So they're assistants, but at the same time they are learning. They are learning to be priests themselves. So in this way, a heavenlier functioning with a finer mode, much more refined, lit up with its grace, our human outward earthliness. Asvapati is still a human being, but there's something in him which lights up his humanness with this heavenlier function and grace. So the soul's experience of its deeper sheaths. We can think that our soul is always following our experience, our outer experience, but it's maybe not so aware because we are not so aware of the deeper sheaths, the other bodies, the subtle bodies, that was sleeping as if drugged by the dominance of matter. But when the matter and the response of the body becomes more refined, then the soul can be more aware of its deeper inner beings. So as a result of that, this dead wall, this material wall that closes us off from our wider selves, opens. There's a door opening. That door opens into a secrecy of apparent sleep, as if within we are sleeping. There's this mystic tract which is behind and beyond our waking thoughts. We are not usually aware of it. It's separated from us by this dead wall of matter's dominance. But this door opens. It's built in, it's held up by the force of matter, but it opens into the inner worlds. So that sets free things that our earthly senses can't feel. A world unseen, unknown by outward mind, appeared in the silent spaces of the soul. Will you read, please? Yes.
These patterns which were chambers looking out into the luminous countries of the unknown, where all things dreamed by the mind are seen and true, and all that the life longs for is drawn close. We saw the perfect in their starry homes, feeling the glory of the deathless, laying in the arms of the eternal feet, wrapped in the heartbeat of God ecstasy. He lived in the mystic space where thought is born, and where is nourished by the ethereal fire, and fed on the white milk of the eternal strength, till it grows into the likeness of a God. In the witness occurs rooms with mind-built walls on hidden interiors, lurking passages. Open the windows of the inner side. We own the house of undivided time, lifting the heavy curtain of the flesh. He stood upon a threshold serpent washed, and peered into gleaming endless corridors, silent and listening in the silent heart. For the coming of the new and the unknown, he gazed across the empty stillnesses, and heard the footsteps of the unwinged item in the far avenues of the beyond. He heard the secret voice, the word that moves, and saw
Thank you. Anybody would like to ask or share anything about this passage?
Threshold 321, threshold of serpent was stood. He stood upon the threshold of serpent. What does he mean by serpent?
He means a snake, a serpent. But the serpent always represents some kind of energy, and many entrances, many different kinds of entrances are guarded by serpents. They have to, these energies have to allow or not allow people to pass through. He doesn't pass through for the time being. He only stands on the threshold and looks through the door that has been covered up by this heavy curtain of the flesh, this physical being that occupies so much of our attention. So, looking through that opening, he can see these gleaming, endless corridors. He is silent, and he's listening in the silent heart. He's waiting for what will come through those corridors, what will approach the new and the unknown. And as he gazes across those silent, empty stillnesses, he can hear the footsteps of the undreamed idea, an idea of something completely new. It's approaching, or it's moving in those far avenues of the beyond. Perhaps one day it will emerge into the material manifestation. And he hears the secret voice, the word that knows, the word of creation that is full of knowledge, and saw the secret face that is our own.
Last time you said there are 8 different experiences explained here.
Did I? Yes, so we can start counting if you like.
Is it related to this Ashta Siddhi? There is something called Siddhi. There are 8 different Siddhis. Is it something related to that Ashta Siddhi?
I don't know. We can check what are the experiences. First is this pure perception. And then there's this magical accord which is able to refine the physical so much that this perception into the subtle worlds and the subtle being opens up. And then there's this the experience of undivided time, yes, that can only come with this subtle vision, being aware of the continuity of past and present and future. Is this separated at all?
Maybe the inner sight, opening the windows of the inner sight.
This is one of the achievements, isn't it? Yes, one of the experiences. And later on we'll have the subtle hearing. He describes in detail about the subtle hearing, and touch and smell. All these things come with this opening into the subtle world.
This last and saw the secret face that is our own.
What would suggest to you, Audrey?
The same face.
Sorry?
That we all have the same face.
That our most essential face, it's the same for all of us. Yeah. In the manifestation, we express many, many, many different faces. But the most essential, central face is what unites us all. Yeah. So that's a very special experience to come across that. When Mother...
The universal Purusha? Is that the universal Purusha?
That's maybe one of the labels we could put on it, yes. Why not? Yes. In another place in the poem, Aurobindo speaks about the lover, who is the beloved, who comes to us again and again across the years. bearing the same sweet face that is our own. Yes? He says something like that. Yeah. Shall we go on? Lorraine, would you read?
The inner flames uncovered their crystal doors. Strange powers and influences touched his life. A vision came of higher realms than ours. The consciousness of brighter fields and skies, of beings less circumscribed than we've lived in, and cellular bodies in these passing frames, objects too fine for our material grasp, acts vibrant with a superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscient force, and joys that never flow through mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than earth's, and happier lives, a consciousness of beauty and of bliss, a knowledge which became what it perceived, replaced the separated sense and heart, and drew all nature into its embrace. The mind leaned out to meet the hidden world. Air flowed and teemed with marvelous shapes and hues, and the nostrils quivered celestial fragrances. On the tongue lingered the honey of paradise.
Thank you. So this experience of subtle celestial fragrances and flavors, the flavor of the Amrita, and what he will describe next, the subtle hearing, these are all familiar, recognized achievements of yoga, of different kinds of yoga, through this subtilization of the physical being. These subtle experiences become possible. The honey of paradise. That's also the Amrita which gives immortality.
This line, knowledge which becomes what it perceived. Can you throw some light more on this?
I think this is what Sri Aurobindo calls knowledge by identity. It means it's not knowledge that has to be sought out by gathering data and putting it together and reasoning it out. It's something that is known as we know things about ourselves, by a very direct experience, which is also one of the, of course, the aims of yoga, to achieve this kind of knowledge by identity. Yes, Ganga.
This aspect, when you describe now, is also in the physical or in the physical level?
All levels.
Sorry?
All levels. You can obtain it by concentrating. For instance, when I work, I did a lot of things. I did my own kitchen. I'm not a carpenter. You put your consciousness in your hands and calm down, and it comes. This kind of knowledge is also there. Also knowledge, if I want to be you, I concentrate. And I can catch it. You should do it. Very interesting. Try it.
I don't. If I could just feel my
I personally like it a lot, this kind of things. I do it every day.
When I pursue something, immediately it's not my imagination, but immediately I receive knowledge why I pursue it. Immediately. Not every time, but normally when you are concentrated, automatically.
I would like to share an experience. It's physical, I believe, because Ramakrishna Bhavan was watching a cow get smashed.
Yes, yeah.
Not smashed, what they call it, hit. And he
Had the-
bit mark on his back.
Yes.
That is an example of knowledge.
of identification. Yes.
Physical.
Sri Aurobindo also gave another example of when you're angry, you don't say to yourself, I think I'm angry.
No, you know that you're angry.
You know you're angry.
Yes.
And this identity with the angry.
Yes.
So,
So he tells us that this kind of knowledge that we have of ourself can, through the psychological self-discipline of yoga, be extended so that it's no longer just a knowledge about this little being encased in this little body. He says this is one of the three methods of Vedantic knowledge. It is the first one is by pure reason, by the reason uninfluenced by any physical sense data. And the second one is this extension of the sense of identity. And then he says one can compare the conclusions one comes to in these two ways with those reached by others who have followed the paths. So what do the ancients say? What do the rishis say? And if all these three agree, then you can be fairly confident that it's correct, that it's not an illusion.
But I give you a simple example. When I came recently in Savitri, Bhavan, somebody is with me, and he helped me and he showed me what I do immediately. Alors I do, and exactly what I don't want, but
still you had to do it.
He's incredible. In this moment, for me, is very new after reason. It's very, very, very interesting. Yesterday, for example, Saturday afternoon, we are meeting there. And somebody passed, and I have question to show him. And this morning, yesterday I don't receive, but this morning I do in my room something and suddenly coming, but up. It's totally different from the mind. Totally. I am so happy. Alors it's very, very hard. It's very, very,
it's very nice when we begin to be able to get solutions to our little problems like this. No, somebody was telling me the other day how she was completely stuck. She couldn't open her front door. She just couldn't. The key would not work, and she had to ask a neighbor to come and pull and push the door until it became open. But then, of course, she was inside and she was alone at home, and she thought, how can I manage with a door like this? And she felt it was Mother telling her, try a couple of drops of oil. and then the key worked so easily. It's so nice. No? So that's really nice. That's grace. So we digressed a bit, didn't we? What comes next is the hearing. Shall we read about the hearing? Alice. Line 249. Page 29, near the top, line 249. Yes.
Hearing was a stream of magic audience, a bed for occult sounds earth cannot hear. Out of a covert tract of slumber self, the voice came of truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. Only long, listening flood bears the world's insoluble doubt on pilgrimage without goal. The laughter, sleepless pleasure, foam and spume, and murmurings of desire that cannot die. The cry came of the world's delight to be. The grandeur and greatness of its will to live. The call of the soul's adventure into space. The traveler through the magic centuries. And beings labor in matter's universe. Its search for the mystic meaning of its birth and joy of high spiritual response. Its throb of satisfaction and content. All the sweetness gives life. Its large breath and pulse and thrill, hope, fear. Its taste, pangs, tears, and ecstasy. Its raptures poignant, deep, sudden bliss. The song of its passion and unending pain.
Thank you. So the subtle hearing becomes like a channel, a river bed through which universal harmony is flowing. It's a bed, a channel for hidden sounds that our physical ears can't hear. And listening to that universal harmony out of a covered tract of slumber self, this inner being that seems to be sleeping, the voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. Only mid an omniscient silence heard. If one can be silent enough to know everything, one can hear that truth, the voice of that truth. It can be held by the intuitive heart and some secret sense of hearing perhaps. And that voice caught the burden of secrecies sealed and dumb. The burden has a double meaning. A burden is something that we carry that has a weight, but it can also be the refrain of a song or the message, the essence of a message. So I think that's here, it's the essential significance of certain secret things that are sealed up and unable to express themselves. This voice expresses the unfulfilled demand of earth, that demand which has led to the birth, or which will lead to the birth of Savitri, and at the same time the song of promise of unrealized heavens, of great high achievements which have not yet manifested. And it expressed all that hides in an omnipotent sleep. There's a sleep state out of which everything can emerge. And then he hears this long, listening flood, this flow that's carrying the world's insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal. We don't know where everything is flowing to, no? In this unceasing drama carried by time. It's like a great river. But on the surface of that river, there's a laughter of sleepless pleasure, foamed and spumed, bubbles and spray flying up, and murmurings of desire that cannot die. This is all expressing the world's delight to be, pure delight of existence, which keeps everything in existence, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live. And there's also this recall, this remembrance of the soul's adventure into space, why we're all here, why we have made this choice to participate in this adventure of unconsciousness and evolution. The soul has adventured into space and time as a traveler through the magic centuries. And this voice expresses that memory and also the labor of being in the universe of matter, being, existence, its search for the mystic meaning of its birth. Why do I exist? Why am I here? And it also expresses the joy of high spiritual response and the throb of existence, the delight of existence, of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of life. Its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture's poignant beat of sudden bliss, the sob of its passion and unending pain. All the different tastes of the delight to be are expressed by this voice, by this voice of this music of universal harmony. He's able to hear all that. We can read a little further. Jean-Yves, would you read a little? We're at the bottom of page 29, line 279.
The murmur and whisper of the unheard sound, which crowd around our hearts to find the window and swell into the canticle of all that suffer to be still unknown, and all that lingers vainly to be born, and all the sweetness bound with heaven. And all the beauty that will never be, inaudible to our deaf mortal ears, the wide world rhythms, all that can chant, to which our shrines fit our wine is given, melting our limits in the illimitable, tuning finite to infinity. Alone, muttering roll from the circumscribed gates, the stomach of the final equinox, answered without inarticulate questioning, dares truth with lightning neck and thunder's wings, a radiant hymn to the inexpressible, and the anthem of the superconscient life.
Thank you. These lines are so poignant, no? This murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds which are crowding round our hearts, but find no window to enter. To his subtle hearing, this murmur and whisper swelled into a canticle, a sacred song of all that suffers to be still unknown, and all that labors vainly to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be, things that want to be and don't get manifested.
I relate this section very much to the opening line of the canto. It says, the world's desire compelled from the
Yes. Yes. This expresses all that desire. Yes, genau. Yes, exactly. And perhaps it's maybe about these 2 pages, Prasad, that I said 8 things. you starting from this channel of universal harmony. Maybe there are 8 songs that he hears. I don't want to check it right now, but I think it could be that I might have meant. So there's all this, the things that want to be, and are not yet realized. But then next come these wide world rhythms, that there are these cosmic rhythms. And he says that life tries to fit our rhyme beats to those rhythms. Okay. That would, if we are in harmony with those wide world rhythms, then that would melt our limits. We would merge with that illimitable, and our finite existence would get tuned, harmonized to infinity. And then I love this last sentence. There's this low muttering he hears coming up from the subconscious. It's the stammer of the primal ignorance that can't express itself, but it has something to express. Sri Aurobindo says it's an inarticulate questioning, maybe even a demand that is inarticulate, can't express itself properly. But there's a response in answer to that inarticulate questioning. There comes down this radiant hymn to the inexpressible and the anthem of the superconscient light. From above there comes such a powerful assurance and adoration. It comes down like a storm with lightning's neck and thunder's wings. It's a tremendously powerful response that comes in answer to that inarticulate questioning coming up from the subconscious.